Welcome to Navigate Housing Unlocked, where we open real conversations about affordable housing, community development, and the people building stronger communities. I'm Ebony Hall, Director of Marketing and Communications at Navigate Affordable Housing Partners. At Navigate, we believe that when we share what works, everyone benefits, especially the nonprofits doing the work on the ground. In this episode, Capacity Before Capital, our Director of Planning and Community Development, Matt Chernock, talks with Archie Hill about how community development corporations and really any nonprofit with a neighborhood mission can prepare for funding, build trust with partners, and strengthen their capacity to deliver. Let's jump into the conversation.
Archie Hill. Thanks for coming out. How are you?
Glad to be here.
Good. So, Navigate Affordable Housing Partners is starting to try and reach out and help other agencies. We see a lot of agencies that have really good intentions, but don't necessarily know what the next step or how do I attract the funders or the partners or something like that. So really just wanted to kind of have a conversation with you this morning as kind of somebody who's been there, who's done that. Really what you're seeing and ways that organizations can structure themselves so that they can set themselves up for success. So I think it might be important, just give us a little bit of your background. How'd you get to Navigate? What'd you do before that?
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. I've been at Navigate 22 months. Prior to that, I was at a community development corporation as the housing development director. My background, though, is in banking and finance. Was at the bank in Chicago for about 8 years doing commercial lending. Then I became a community reinvestment officer for First Union Bank, which is now Wells Fargo, dealing with community development corporations and trying to invest in the community to promote community development.
So you've been on both the nonprofit side and kind of the institutional, the lending side of that.
Yes, I actually used to fund CDCs through the foundations and through the banking programs that we had. And then actually I left the bank and went to a community development corporation to run the housing development program. And so I have really a different view of both sides of the equation of running a community development corporation.
All right, so we keep using the word community development corporation. Is that synonymous with like a nonprofit or faith-based? Where does that, we'll call it a CDC, where does that fall? And, what are the parameters around?
Yeah, typically community development corporations are focused on a particular area or a neighborhood. They have a mandate or a mission to help increase housing, feed people, take care of some of the social ills that are in that community.
So is that like a designation? What does that look like?
To get a community development corporation designation, you really have to file with the IRS. It's a 501c3 designation, which gives you tax exempt status,
right,
which allows you to solicit funding from funders to help you further your mission.
Yeah, okay. So I hear place-based. Is that mission critical to what a CDC does? Is that how you differentiate between what a CDC and just like a general nonprofit might be?
Typically, a community development corporation focuses in on a community. We do have community-wide CDCs that focus on a broader geographic area, but typically it is place-focused, neighborhood-focused.
Okay. Is there a certain structure to these CDCs? What are we kind of looking at? Let's just say I'm a well-meaning individual. I see a need in our community. We need more affordable housing, or we need some blight elimination. Point me in a direction. Where do I start?
Well, it kind of starts with what we say is organizational basics.
Yeah.
Kind of just the basic. What is my mission? What am I doing? What are the issues in this community? And do I have a statement that expresses our commitment to this community? Then it really goes to really simple things like bylaws, articles of incorporation, the 501c3 designation are all kind of the mechanics you need to kind of get started. From there, you have to have a board of directors. You have to have someone that guides the organization that has experience. And ideally, the board gives you a lot of expertise if you have, say, legal expertise or financial expertise or other things that may help the organization solve some of the community ills that it has.
So this I'm going to call it foundational support, right? So that's, I've got the good idea, but now I need to wrap around some sort of structure that helps me implement what I'm trying to do. On the lending side, you mentioned you were on that kind of that side of the aisle. How important is that to a lender, the foundational support of a CDC?
Yeah, that's a good question. Very important. As a past banker, we would look for certain things, and so if I had a community development corporation come to me and say, "I need funding to further my mission," some of the first things I ask about is, "What's your financial situation? Do you have financial statements?
Hmm.
Do you have a board of directors? Do you have those bylaws? And if you do, I need you to package those up and give those to me." That's the beginning of how we begin to evaluate a community development corporation's ability to perform its mission.
Yeah. So is a lot of that like stock information? Is that something you would encourage a CDC to kind of have preloaded, ready to go? Um,
Yeah,
in my
absolutely.
head, I'm hearing kind of a checklist of things that
Yeah,
need to be in place.
it's preparation. I mean, it's like preparation for a game or a football player. You have to lift weights. You have to
Right.
eat right and do certain things. And for a CDC, it's the same kinds of things. Do you have that mission statement I mentioned? Do you have your paperwork in order so you can present the organization? From there, you have to be able to present your idea
Hmm.
and sell the bank or the funder on. Do you have the ability to execute what your mission is saying?
Yeah. So what would that look like? Like to me, that's a community development plan. That's some sort of analysis of what we're trying to do in the community. How much data metrics does an organization like that need to put together to attract outside funding?
The more, the better.
Yeah.
If you know your community, you should know your community better than anyone else. And so data is driving a lot of things nowadays. Have you done a neighborhood study? Do you know what the critical needs are? Have you assessed what those needs are in the community and the depth of that need?
Hmm.
Do you have a program? Do you have personnel? Do you have a plan that you can execute that begins to get at that issue? And that's what we're looking for.
Is that codified like it would be like the organizational documents, or is that something that's kind of driven by the mission of the
I
organization?
think it's a hybrid of both. I think when we are funding CDCs, there is a checklist. There are things that
Right.
we quantifiably look at, but then there are also the intangibles. Do you have a handle on what the community really wants? Have you talked to the community? Do you have community advocates, people that are advocating your position and advocating for the needs for that community? All of that's important when you're trying to fund a community where there are a lot of social ills. And
Hmm.
so a funder is looking to see, do we have the right player in place? Do they have the right organization in place? Have they done all the mechanics that are necessary to fulfill that mission? And what I've experienced is you have a lot of passion
Right.
a lot of times, and this is passionate work. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're taking on a neighborhood ills and social ills, that's tough work, and you have to have passion, but you also have to have a plan,
Yeah.
and you have to be able to execute that plan, and you have to be able to communicate that to funders.
The word that keeps, I think, coming up in this is this notion of funders. In my head, that's, do I go down to the bank? Who am I talking to? Give me an idea of what, in your head, someone who is in that funding seat is. Are there different approaches? Are there different entities?
Well, typically, community development corporations start at the bank. That's because that's where the money is.
Right.
And banks have an obligation under the Community Reinvestment Act is to understand what's happening in their communities they serve and to fund some of those social ills to try to fix some of those. And so banks have always been a great place to start for looking for funding. Prior to that, though, is you need a checking account.
Right.
You need to have some kind of financial wherewithal, and that's where you start. If your checking account is at a bank, I would start at that bank, and I would go there and I would ask for an application. I'd say, "What do you need to give me some operational funding so I can carry out this mission?"
Yeah.
They're going to hand you a document, and it's going to be a pretty long document that says, "Do you have these items?" And it's probably 20 to 30
Hmm.
things that you need to have. I mentioned some of those earlier, the mission statement, the bylaws, financial statements, etc. Um, and those are things you need to have in place And that is a great beginning process to ask the bank's foundation, could I get some operating money to fund my mission?
Talk a little bit more about bank foundations. Is that separate and apart from the bank? What?
Yes, yes. So banks have the main entity, which is the operating company where you go get your loans and checking accounts, and then they have a philanthropic or a foundation arm as well, which is somewhat separate from the bank. The bank funds it,
Mhm.
but the foundation cannot benefit the bank with that money. Typically, they give that money out in communities that they serve, where their branches are, their geographic area. They look for nonprofits,
Mhm.
typically not always CDCs, but nonprofits that are doing good work in the community, and they give dollars to that work.
Would you suggest a CDC or another nonprofit start with the foundations, or do you start with the bank, or what's the hierarchy here?
Yes, I would start with the banks and the foundations. And typically, if you go, you have nonprofit corporations, you have other nonprofits in the area. I would start with a large one and just make a call to them and say, hey, who are the funders
Yeah.
in this area, and should I approach those, and how should I approach those?
What about funders in like the nonprofit sector? I know Navigate has a couple programs where we help other nonprofits with funding requests. Where do you I'm thinking capital stack for my project. Where do you put those other players in the community that might have dollars to invest or give away in programs like this?
Yeah, it kind of depends. So you have project dollars and you have operational
Right.
dollars. Operational dollars is what keeps the lights on, what pays the salary, what pays the executive director. Those dollars are typically very hard to get. Foundations and funders like to fund projects. They want to see things happen in the community. We at Navigate understand that you have to have both,
Right.
and that if you don't have operational capacity, you can't carry out your mission. So you have to distinguish what your ask is.
Yeah.
You can't ask for $100,000 and give 75 to the executive director and 25 to the
Program.
program. No one will fund that. Most funders are going to give 100 to the program, and then you're going to say as an organization, well, how do I execute on that? And that's the balance of
Yeah.
nonprofits on a daily
Yeah,
basis.
sure. Um, in the world of housing, there's other opportunities, federal and state dollars that can flow into this. How do you see those engaging with the CDC? I'm thinking like LIHTC or CDBG or other programs like that. Can
Yeah,
CDCs leverage in that space?
absolutely. I think now the low income housing tax credit,
Mhm.
LIHTC, is
Right.
probably a little sophisticated for a startup CDC, but certainly the community development block grant funding, which is from HUD, which goes to the municipality or to
Mhm.
the city, you're certainly eligible for those funds. And those community development partners in those municipalities are always looking for community development corporations that can execute the mission, and the city and the municipality will fund that with community development block grant funding.
So it sounds like there's players in this space that really are looking to deploy capital either on the
Yes.
municipal level or at the
Yes.
foundational level.
Yes.
But it's really kind of this institutional track record, or what would you say as far as the like reliability of a CDC to effectively and responsibly deploy capital? How important is that to seeking more
It's
funding?
it's it's critically important. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's the track record.
Yeah,
Can you execute on what you're saying you're going to execute on? It's the organizational basics. It's the financial readiness. It's your housing development experience. Can you put all that together and pull all that together to do what your mission is saying it's doing in a timely way, executing it properly within the rules and regulations and compliance of those funds? Because they all come with strings on them.
sure.
But if you can execute on those, there are more dollars behind that can
Yeah.
come, yes.
Do you think it has to be large programs? I hear in the industry terms like critical repair,
Mhm.
helping elderly stay in homes, weatherization, programs like that. Is that a good place for CDCs to
That's
kind
a
of interface?
that's a great question, Matt, and I think, community development corporations that are in their first 1 to 3 years really should look at that avenue. Critical repair programs are something that are very important to the cities. They wanna get those properties back on the tax rolls so it can get money for the city. It also improves the neighborhood, it brings people back to the communities, and it eliminates blight. And so working with your local municipality to do critical repair funding is really positive for your organization. It shows that you can execute. It shows the funders you can execute. It shows the city you can execute. It lets the neighborhood know you're making a impact in that community. It's a win-win-win across the board.
Yeah. I want to back up a little bit and talk the planning aspect of this. Kind of the missional direction of a CDC or a nonprofit. How things like housing construction, critical repair, even social services, rent subsidies or food banks or
Mhm.
something like that
Mhm.
play in. Um, can you talk a little bit about the importance of like a guiding document or a community development plan for these organizations and how
Yes.
that all overlaps with attracting funding and other aspects of that?
Yeah, I think that's part of your. When I mentioned your mission statement, and some of the other things, one of the things you must have as a CDC is you have to have a community vision. You have to have a plan. You have to have a way to engage the community and all of the partners in there to make that happen. And some communities I worked in had framework plans
Hmm.
where the municipality funded those plans, and they were, most of the time, they were just sitting on the table. If you as an organization take that plan and make it live, you already have a path forward. It shows you a plan. It gives you steps. Um, and funders see if your ability to execute on that plan and you can do that, you will begin to receive
Yeah.
more funding.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what are some components that make up that plan? Can we talk a little bit about that? Because one thing I think is remarkably challenging in a lot of these communities is how do you get access to dirt? How do you get lots? We see the blighted property, but it's so convoluted process of how do we get to that? So if I were to develop a community development plan for my CDC, just talk a little bit about what some of those components might be in that plan.
Yeah, it literally gets down to infrastructure. Do you have the utility that you need in the ground to build housing? That's very important to the costs of what it could be. Have you done a needs assessment? Do you really know what the problems are, and who and how you could tackle those problems? Um, I mentioned earlier the framework plan. A lot of cities do assessments of each neighborhood because they have to secure HUD funding. If you as a CDC can get your hands on your community part of that plan, understand it, read it, it'll tell you the players, who's involved, and really engage in that plan. That's a way to jumpstart your organization, and it's also a way to receive funding.
Yeah. So much of this is interlaced problems in the community.
Yep.
How important is it to have good partners at the table? And what do some of those partners look like? Because I would put funders as a partner in this, but are there other partners that a CDC or nonprofit should be looking to bring to the table to bring capacity?
Absolutely. I think you have partners, and of course, you start off. I think your first partners are your board of directors,
Hmm.
typically. And so, if you have a chairman of the board that is well connected to the existing community, that always helps. If you have the kinds of disciplines on your board, legal, accounting, architects, people like the professionals that can help you execute these plans, they have a network of professionals that they work with that they can introduce you to. It's a step-by-step process to grow your organization, but it does start with your board of directors. It starts with your ability as a leader, an executive director, to go out and connect those dots and bring those people into your mission to execute that
Yeah,
mission.
yeah. So let's go back to I'm a guy. I have a really good vision for what my community can turn into, but I don't really know where to get started. What are some resources that I can tap to? I think we gave a pretty good list of, these are the things that you need, but who are the players that can help me package that together? Do lenders come involved? Can they help me get a package together? I know Navigate does some capacity building. Is that an avenue you would point others to?
Yeah, bankers are always looking at packages. I think they're probably not the best to help put one together. You do have nonprofits that work with nonprofits. Community Foundation,
Mhm.
for instance, here works with CDCs to help get them in shape to secure funding. As a matter of fact, some of the new CDCs can get operational funding from a community foundation type organization to help them build that momentum.
Yeah. So, what would you say are some pitfalls to avoid as a startup CDC, as an established CDC? What are some things that constantly come up about if we could just stop doing that, we would be a lot more successful as an
I think a
organization?
lot of it is really aligning your mission and not getting too over your skis.
Hmm.
I've found that when I walk into young CDCs that haven't had a lot of activity, their plans are literally too grand. And so if you've never built a home before, or
Right.
if you've never rehabbed a house, or if you've never done a critical repair, and a banker walks in and says, "What do you need?" And you say, "I need funding for 200 houses." Um, that's not
Yeah.
reality, and and it runs funders away.
So that goes back to that track record thing.
Yes, it
Have to
does.
establish a track record so you're
And that's why the small hits like the critical repair
right.
programs, which are really in high demand, the cities need to get that money out the door. There's a huge need to get homes repaired. That's usually a easier entry level for CDCs that are trying to do housing development to start there and then to build upon
And
that.
that's something that a lender would look at as experience.
Oh, absolutely. And not only would you show that you could carry out the mission of that funding, it shows that you can execute. I mean,
Hmm.
now you can receive funding, you can put it in the project, you can execute the project and show that your results there
Yeah.
and build upon that.
Yeah.
When I was at a CDC, I started that same way. And so I'm not saying anything I read out of a book. I literally was sitting in an old house that we rehabbed, reading a framework plan,
Right.
trying to figure out how do we begin development, and critical repair is where I started. And I literally just put an application together. I put all that information that we talked about earlier together. I submitted to the city, and they said, "You can do 3 houses."
Right. Yeah.
And I was elated. And we went from 3 and we ended up doing 20. And so it builds upon itself. It's a if you are successful in executing those critical repair programs on a municipal level, they will continue to give you funding.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about what that looks like. The experience track record or the ability to carry out programs. How much is how much value do you put into monitoring programs? The demonstrating that we can do this. Is that something that really needs to be a point of
Oh,
emphasis as you
absolutely.
look through this?
What you need to do is once you finish your first critical repair, you need to take a picture of before and after. You need to do a brochure. You need to celebrate it in the community. You need to let the funders know what you were able to do. And your quality of work is very important.
Sure.
People are going to walk through and see how you did critical repairs. Not only did you do them in budget and in time, but what's the quality of work?
Hmm.
Because funders don't want to fund something and it doesn't look good or doesn't show well. That speaks to the organization's
Yeah, sure.
ability.
Well, I think it's really great that you could talk about that from both the perspective of the lender and somebody who's run a housing program for a CDC. I think those two marry really, really well. Is there anything else that, what's the word of warning or the encouragement to the CDC that's trying to do good in the community?
Well, I think in the end, capacity is what makes the difference. Strong communities start with strong CDCs. That's all there is to it. When the organization has the foundation in place, clear governance, sound financing, and staff that the community can trust, it can take the vision to reality, and that's ultimately what folks are trying to do. And this is really trying to help CDCs understand that it's not just a mission, that it's not just wanting to develop or having the passion to develop, but do you have the operational mechanics and the organizational capacity to make that vision
Yeah,
come
right.
true.
Absolutely.
That's
Well,
what it's about.
Archie, thanks. This has been great. I hope, other nonprofits and CDCs benefit from this and, maybe Navigate can be a resource to those organizations.
Yeah, I hope so. We want to. This is very important to help. Affordable housing is a big issue these
Right.
days, and these communities need and want affordable housing. There's a huge demand, and so to the extent that community development corporations could really wrap their arms around getting their organization in shape, seeking the right funders,
Right.
and really producing affordable housing, that is a lasting mission.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good work, and glad people are doing it.
Yep. We're excited to see it more
Yeah.
happen.
All right. Thanks, Archie.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Navigate Housing Unlocked. This episode was all about capacity because when nonprofits are prepared and connected, communities thrive. If you'd like to learn more about capacity building for your organization and how Navigate can help with that, please visit our website at navigatehousing.com.